Hi there, I'm Sipka, and this is the Apatros review. Now in this episode we'll take a look at the franchise of games known as Hotel Romanstein, or Hotel Romanstein depending on which way you say it. These are a series of games, a franchise of games made by a modder in South Korea named Mr. Choi. The original game came out on the 31st of August 2004. Now these games are pretty much based on the Wolfenstein 3D engine, and to play the original games, like the original version, you need to have DOSBox. But there are 4GL versions of each game available, so you can play them on modern machines without emulators. Now, the genre, this is basically a first-person shooter plus dungeon crawler, which is the thing with these Wolfenstein 3D engines. It's a single-player game, and the number of levels depends on the game, usually between 6 and 10. As for general playability on easy, it depends on your reflexes. Although the enemy's superior reflexes and extremely limited ammo storage will make things difficult. There is no player-ally bot support. The enemy AI competence has a simple destroy and sight program, but they have insane reflexes. The boss enemy endurance is, well, the boss is usually approximately 50 times more durable than the most basic mooks. Now, there are only 3 weapons in the game, not including the melee weapon, but with only a 99 round limit for the total ammo pool. All the weapons use the same ammo. Now for the worst weapon, ironically it's the minigun, since it's an ammo hog. Slower firing weapons tend to have better use since their rate of fire makes conservation of ammo easier. Remember, you only have 99 rounds capacity. And the best weapon is between the pistol and submachine gun. You can see the submachine gun right down on the screen, the red thing. Now, I picked the submachine gun as the best weapon since the pistol is too slow to cope with those groups of foot mooks. And the submachine gun's fire rate is decent enough to suppress foes without burning through the ammo pool too fast. Now as for cannon fodder, well, it's tied between the foot mooks and the standard pistol firing mooks. The toughest enemy will be a tie between the top 2 tiers of elite mooks, the machine gun firing ones and the akimbo pistol firing ones. Now as for the estimated completion time, depends on the number of levels, roughly an hour to 90 minutes depending on game and player skill. Now before I go on to review this franchise of DOS games, first I must explain a little something about the history of these mods. When the first FPS game, Castle Wolfenstein 3D, came out with the shareware first episode all the way back in 1992, about the same time I returned to Australia after spending a good deal of my early childhood in Yugoslavia, about 6 days after the shareware game came out, a mysterious modder released XXX Wolf, the world's first mod, and also the first adult-themed mod ever. Whoever the creator was, the fact that they managed to create an entirely new game out of modifying shareware code in only 6 days is very, very impressive. My money is on the modder being one of the ID Software staff indulging in a covert side project alongside working the original game. The Wolf 3D engine was only dominant for a very brief time, less than a year, before becoming obsolete with the awesome iconic Doom coming out shortly thereafter. But ID Software freely gave away the Wolf 3D engine since they had no further use for it. As a result, many others took the now obsolete engine and made entirely new games out of it. This ran the full spectrum of resources from the big league players. Bethesda Softworks used it for their third Terminator game with their first true FPS game, Terminator Rampage, and to the B players. The infamous Capstone used Wolf 3D for their first 2 games of Corridor 7 Alien Invasion, and a truly notorious Operation Body Count, which I actually kind of liked. It was filled with problems, but fit in nicely with the era, and actually it's playable if you take the time to understand it and read the manual. I had no problems with it. Corridor 7 is still a better game of the 2, by the way, and to a whole community of modders. Homebrew games using Wolf 3D still pop up as late as the early 2010s. But for the problem with these games is that they all need you to install DOSBox on your computer to play them. As such, the engine has a severe drag on the cycle rate, so the frame rate can be incredibly stiff, going to single digits. This actually was a big problem with the Terminator Rampage. Of course, this inspired modders to make mods of just about every other popular game that shows up. Even shysters using cheap open source engines like Unity to make games completely out of asset flips, putting various stock elements together to make some of the most pointless and useless games ever inflicted upon mankind. A recent example being a string of softcore FPS games made by some scam outfit with the word hentai in their titles, but being anything but, all of which were available on Steam during the late 2010s, which were all practically pathetic. If you're a Steam customer, you'll probably heard of them. Many mods are pretty bad and mediocre, but there are also plenty of good hard-working mods that gained an awesome reputation like H-Doom, A Boy in His Barrel, Brutal Doom, and of course the staple of early 2000s internet cafes, the ubiquitous Counter-Strike, which I was a serious player of back in the day. Yes, I'm Counter-Strike vet. Now, as for the Hotel Romanstein franchise, this ties in with the first generation mods using the Wolf 3D engine. After about a decade or so, the first unique mods using the Wolf 3D engine for the solely adult content, not including the XXX Wolf, began to appear. In 2003, Mr. Choi, a Korean modder, decided to make an adult-themed mod called Hotel Pornostein, which had the player infiltrate Nazi brothel killing SS hookers. But what made this one stand out among the few who played it back in the day was the X-rated nude sprites. For example, the German Shepherd guard dogs were replaced by naked women with whips, and stills on the walls of real-life porn actresses in Playboy cinderhalls, and the machine gun replaced by what looks like something I can't describe right now because my otherwise excellent creative mind hasn't processed it quite yet. My mental DOSBox emulator needs to update. I'll get it when the time comes to review that game one day. This game was only available on Mr. Choi's personal website for a short time before being replaced by the Hotel Romanstein franchise of games, but some websites today have the game available, so if you want to look it up. As for compatibility concerns, well, if you're the top hardcore gamer who can install HDMI successfully on your computer, then this one will be a piece of cake, as long as you have DOSBox in your computer, that is. Mr. Choi replaced the game with Hotel Romanstein, a Wolf 3D mod that is basically Pornostein but with all the nudity removed and replaced with female sprites wearing various degrees of clothing, as you can see. From the color-coded bras and panties of the early games to the reasonably chaste lingerie and dresses of later ones. This is one of the later ones. These Hotel Romanstein games also have an additional version encoded 4GL, which is one of those 4GL versions of what you're seeing right now, which enables them to be played modern, by that I mean Windows 10 machines, and so on without an emulator needed. These replacement sprites have a manga or anime feel to them, but no nudity ever seen. This game spawned a shitload of sequels, at least 10, before Mr. Choi stopped making these after about the 9th entry and the American mod took over mixed results. The Hotel Romanstein games are, save for the different degrees of clothing map layout, practically identical. The two games I played for the purposes of this review, Hotel Romanstein Gold Free and Hotel Romanstein Revisited is the one you're seeing on your screen right now, were both almost identical. With the same 6 maps, and the only difference being that Gold Free had only basic underwear, while Revisited had more clothing on. Playing each was rather disappointingly interesting, as I didn't at the time know the cheat codes for Gold Free, but for Revisited was playing the 4GL version, I read up the cheats on the readme text file and the game file, so playing it was actually significantly easier. The main problem is, especially for younger gamers who are not born during the Wolf 3D Doom build engine days, is that these early games had high concentration of enemies, hit-scan firing speeds, and more intricate level design that makes those who did not cut their teeth on these early generation first-person shooter games utterly unable to cope with the swarms of enemies that show up here. Oh, and there's no such thing as regenerating health in these early FPS games, so you're going to need to locate as many health pickups as you can to manage the ones that you can carry with you accordingly. I've known Doom and build engine players to say that today's Call of Duty players will be utterly obliterated by these early games, and I agree with that completely. Personally, I'm adept at these sort of games, but only because I use the same tactics many Doom and build engine fans did, activate the God mode cheats, which is a style of approvable yet dirty tactic we rolled with back in the day. If you want to be a hardcore FPS player and want to be badass at it, I recommend in the strongest of terms to start these early games. If you can walk through a storm bullets and Wolf 3D engine game and come out unscathed, then you're capable of being a badass. And badass players approve of using cheats. Although with Wolf 3D engine games, some of these games actually punish you for using cheats by resetting your score every time you use cheats. And there was no true God mode here, as your health wasn't permanently kept at the same integer. So you were stuck in the trap of using a cheat to replenish your health as a sort of de facto regenerating health system, but with the score keep resetting to 0. So you're stuck with a choice of either going for the high score but duking out the hard way, or playing the game just for survival purposes and using a cheat constantly to restore your health and ammo after every encounter. Tough choice, I know. But while these types of games are useful for building badasses out of novice first-person shooter players, and also providing some eye candy, the Hotel Romanstein franchise is, in a word, atrocious. Sure, the mechanics work to a reasonable degree, although mouse and keyboard sensitivity is so high I found myself spending about 10-20 seconds to enter a door without missing it completely because my movement speed was insanely fast, as you can see. And some of these games come with glitches. Gold Free had glitches where as soon as you got a single shot for the boss in the final level, the game freezes and becomes unplayable, and that game's 4GL version was unable to be played. I thought that's probably due to my copy being taken off an abandonware site that sourced a buggy file. But the real problem is that the tones are absurdly off. The idea of making all the enemies in these games female makes the games feel somewhat misogynistic in nature, while the nude mods like Pornostein and much later under Femstein actually had a purpose in providing titillation in players so inclined. So these Romanstein games are stuck in a very ugly trap of having female enemies without nudity, thus robbing the games both out of good taste and the sleaziness required to play these sorts of games without feeling the need to have your moral code take a cold shower. As such, I have to mark these Hotel Romanstein games under the lowest grade, my grading ladder, the dreaded D-, 1 out of 10, because they're simply pointless and without the necessary sleaze factor. And pretty much the games come off as just plain nasty. The only positive I can say about this franchise is that these games take anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes to complete depending on player's skill level, would use the cheats, and such are relatively short by modern FPS standards. But in reality, either stick with regular Wolf 3D mods or go for the actual adult stuff. This in-between stuff that just doesn't gel together that well. Now for gore and nudity, there's no gore, aside from the boss getting turned into a dismembered nude torso, which by the way comprises the only nudity in these games. Okay, so that's it for the Hotel Romanstein franchise. Like I said, there's at least a dozen of these games available, but if you count the DDoS and 4GL versions as separate games, then that's at least, well, like 24, 25 games out there. Okay, hope you guys enjoy that. Now, I don't do requests, but if you have any questions about DVDs or films, then hit me up in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer. Hope you guys are staying safe, take it easy, and that's it. See ya.